Friends call me Ro or Rowan. I was born Carli Richards at a little hospital in Akron, Ohio. But after the Navy, I moved to Colorado, and what led up to me being here was, I went to a premiere for a Batman movie because I love Batman, and there was a whole incident that I didn't know was of such epic proportions until the next day. So like luckily I was in the Navy, right? So like we know what tear gas smells like. And everyone knows the story, right? Like Jimmy Holmes comes walking in, lobs a can of tear gas into the crowd, it lands at my feet, and I smell it right away, which I know means to leave. I didn't really know what was happening. And then, I got out to the car and realized like, oh crap, I'm bleeding. And like everything just sunk in. And then from there, yeah, I was, taken to the hospital, and the paramedics told me I'd been shot. And I thought that was insane. I think I laughed at them because it just seems so highly improbable. And a few years later, like I had a bunch of birdshot pellets dug out of me, and I thought I was going to do something with them. I didn't. They just like sat in like a shot glass or something, just kind of staring at me. And I was broke. Like I couldn't hold down a regular job. I was having like sleep paralysis. Like I couldn't sleep when, and it was awful. And I was in so much pain all the time. And I was just like, what do I do? And my partner and I were cleaning off the pellets. We had like two or three of them at the time, I think. And she was like, someone someone might buy them. There is a market for everything, right? And I remembered I had seen this guy on this National Geographic show called Taboo, and he sold what they called murderabilia, and I had no idea like what it was. And so I looked up serial killer memorabilia, and I saw like true crime auction house. I was like, auction, I want to sell them right away. So then I get to the next one, and I'm like, oh, it's the guy from that show. And like the rest is history. It's been a really interesting experience, meeting all these different people and selling memorabilia from a really strange time in my life. So now I'm here.
Was that the first time, Andrew, you were like, oh shit, maybe the branding wasn't spot on, naming the site auction house that isn't an auction site? Is it the first incident that's come up, or
Yeah, actually, no, actually, it hasn't been the first time. People have always been like,
really?
"Where do I go to place a bid on an auction?" It's like
Yeah.
you don't.
Is it the I love the name that is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's your site for true crime memorabilia, but it's just such a catchy, such a good name. But honestly until now didn't realize, oh, somebody might get confused by that, I can imagine.
Right.
Now we know.
Yeah. I mean, it confused me. And of course, like in retrospect, I'm like, I really wish I'd gotten no hate. I don't want to like make any of this about throwing shade at anyone except maybe the homies. But like, I I kind of wish I had gone through Andrew. So yeah, whoopsies. I should have read the website a little more thoroughly, huh?
So tell us what you know about a term by the name murderabilia and what it means to you as a survivor.
Yeah, so I didn't really know much about it before the shooting. Like I mean I didn't even know anything about it until a couple of years later when I was like, oh, I should see if I can sell these on the internet. So like I had seen the Taboo show on Nat Geo, and they talked about how there's people that buy and sell. Like they made it sound like it was like this just like wildly like it was, I don't know, it was almost like the way people talk about cults, right? Like it was like this very dark, like underbelly of America. Like you probably have to download Tor to get to it or something. Like
Mhm.
the way that the whole tone, they were like people buy and sell serial killer memorabilia. And actually, I think that was what I typed in the search bar when I was trying to find someone to sell my stuff through, was serial killer memorabilia. And then all this stuff popped up. It was like murderabilia, 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 and I was like, oh, okay. But like, I didn't know anything about it. It was kind of just like, to me, it was, I don't know. To me, it's like another thing that people collect, like World War II memorabilia. Like to me, it's always just been a weird thing that people collect, right? Like, I collect plenty of weird stuff. So I've got little dead things in jars over here, and really need a second. Sorry. going from like walking in the cold to back here to walking in the cold, like my sinuses are not having it. But yeah, so that's all I really knew about it, was like it's just a weird thing people collect. And now I've noticed it's almost like a whole community, you know what I mean? It's kind of like I have like my guitar gear community, like everyone like buys and sells and trades, and they talk about different gear, and it's kind of exactly the same but just a different type of thing, you know. To me it's almost the same thing though. Like the community seems kind of tight, like people are nice in general. And like, you know, not everyone's got a few bad apples, right? But yeah, for me it's kind of just like, you know, the music gear community, everyone kind of congregates, and yeah, it's an interesting community, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you and I first got in touch, so I had known about the sorry, I had known about the buckshot being sold. I know a Facebook group I was in at some point, somebody posted a photo from it. I'm sure it was a few years after it happened, but and I was like, that's a wild thing to have, like that. It's like a one of a kind thing for sure, being from inside of somebody and being from such a large case. When you first got in touch, you were kind of saying like, hey, I think I have a few things to sell still left over, and I sold these things, and this is the story. And then one of us was like, let's just plan a phone call about it. And I was worried. I was like, well, is this going to be, it was the first time that I've had somebody who was directly associated with some kind of true crime event get in touch. And I had always kind of assumed like, oh, if that ever happens, it's going to be a negative experience, just because it's going to be somebody who's obviously if they're, you know, selling something, like you were trying to kind of come up with ideas or some things to sell that you had, it would be sort of like you had to be doing it coming from a spot of desperation. You didn't really want to have to be dealing in the industry. And then the other point was like, oh, well, this is somebody who was affected by something that you know, maybe I sold something from this guy in the past, or maybe I sold something from a related case, that a different shooting or something that was a sensitive issue for you, and I wouldn't want to be, I do my best to keep my head down or not offend people. So from the beginning, I was nervous about, well, you know, this person could just read me out the whole time about how it's super not okay what I do and this and that, which is totally within anyone's right if they feel that way about this industry. But, you know, I'm not going to try and actively take calls from people like that and either argue with them or let them convince me change what I'm doing. But yeah, we had that first call and you were like just super mellow, super like nice to talk to. And then we ended up figuring out that, you know, we talked a few times and did a few little deals and stuff, and found out that my buddy John was very interested in the case, and he interviewed you, and then he had worked with Felicia Fisher, who you'd worked with recently as well, I think, on a horror project. And it was kind of like this, everyone is sort of intertwined, you know. I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense, that kind of people collecting this stuff and dealing in this stuff are all, you know, even if it's not a direct thing, or even if somebody's into oddities or horror, or there's kind of this weird fringe stuff, it all sort of connects a little bit and creates this weird community of, I guess, just weirdos, right? It was a big relief to like find you as somebody kind of within that community, as opposed to somebody who was trying to put an attack out based on I guess this industry, you would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of like criticism that goes around. I mean, obviously, like I was already dealing with like the conspiracy nutters, like the groupie, the prison groupies. Holy cow! Like just all that stuff. Like, I mean, Megadeth, like who still owes me concert tickets, you know, for that whole Dave Mustaine ordeal. Oh my gosh! Like, I mean, it was a whole thing, right? So like after I had approached someone about selling the pellets, and he was like, I want a lot of press for this. And I was like, like just completely delirious. I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do that. I need to get these sold. I have to eat, you know, like rent is expensive here in Denver. And,
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, it was just a thing that I guess I was already used to, which is sad, obviously. Like I was already used to people coming at me. So like I knew when I was doing interviews for, you know, Westward and stuff like that about this stuff, like I kind of just already knew it was probably coming. So I was I think I was just already, you know, I was already prepared for it to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
before you got in touch with Taylor and anybody else, you know, in the murderabilia world, did you have any like preconceived notions about anybody buying or selling at that point in time? Like if it was odd or weird or sick or what have you?
You know what? I don't know if I did because like I mean also my memory is like awful. It's like a goldfish. Oh, gone. But like when I was a kid, like my dad and I always had some kind of like weird music on rotation. And like of course one of those things was like a CD and it was like Charles Manson Family Sings and like so like I remember being a kid and listening to like Garbage Dump and so I
Yeah.
to me that was like not a weird I can't really like word it properly. Like to me, I didn't have like any moral judgment on it, right? Like it's
Mhm.
good or it's bad or you guys are, but like I knew it was weird because it was something I was into and I'm pretty weird. So I think that was the only preconceived notion I had was just that like this is a weird thing, but
Mhm.
I didn't really know anything before that about like I didn't really know about people buying and selling it before. Like I didn't know much about it. Like to me, it was just like when I saw the Nat Geo documentary, it was just watching another documentary about people collecting things. People
Mhm.
collect dead things in jars, and like, they're all ethically sourced, but do we really know where they came from? I don't know. No shade. I have them, but
Mhm.
I just think that like from like a moral standpoint, no, I don't remember having any like oh, you guys are sick and da da da. Like, I mean, we had rotten.com and this is a cry for help.com. I was reading about Jack the Ripper when I was like, 10 years old. Like, I grew up in the dial-up generation. So yeah, I think I didn't have any preconceived notions from a moral standpoint, I guess my point is, but I obviously was like, oh, it's a pretty weird hobby, but weird is sometimes okay. So
Mhm. And I'm sure that if for some reason one of the other people involved in that incident in the shooting got in touch with either of us, like it could be a totally different story, right? It could be somebody who's just, oh, this is super offensive and this is really bad, or hey, this was a thing I was involved with and I find it like distasteful you're selling this stuff and trying to make a profit or whatever. It's almost as if you were the kind of the perfect person to almost like you were predisposed to be willing to kind of bridge the gap between the community of people buying and selling this stuff and then the people who, I guess, representing some people who had a direct connection to a pretty notable
yeah, and I think like, I also I really haven't met anyone else from like I didn't stay in touch with a lot of other people from the theater, but the people I did stay in
case.
touch with, they were just kind of like, hey, you go girl, like make a positive out of a negative, right? But
Mm-hmm.
and I would like caution anyone that is in my position, like, yeah, there are a lot of people out there that like I've read some press about like people donating something or like just stuff I don't remember happening that supposedly happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, you've got to really be careful that, I mean, that's why I sell my ER reports through you, right? Like I'm not, I
Mm-hmm.
have like one copy and if people want to buy it directly from me, they have to pay more. Cause like there's a lot of predatory people out there in any social circle, right? Like not just here, but
Mm-hmm.
with buying and selling anything. And so like I caution people against, like to really use your best judgment, like listen to your gut and stuff, because there are some people out there that are going to rip you off or whatever. But at the same time, like a lot of collectors and dealers, like, like you guys, it seems like, this is just your business. It's something you do, and
Mm-hmm.
I do like being that person that can kind of bridge that gap and like, it be, I guess, like an example of other people are looking to do that, make the negative into a positive like I did.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for me personally, in this, I'm all this is my full time thing, right? And it's because if I want to do this full time, I don't have the time to be able to source the things that I find, um, or to like dig up new information or whatever. Like I've been shifting a lot into kind of media and archiving video and photos and things like that, finding new information that's useful for documentaries or for research, right? And because I'm doing this full time, I'm able to put all my resources into that. But at the same time, because of that, there's always a risk of like, well, my full time job and the thing that I use to pay my bills is a very I would say controversial career by a lot of standards. And not only that, but it's a small independent business. It's just me, the only person doing everything. So I'm always very cautious about trying to make sure that any kind of business practice I'm doing is as ethical as possible and transparent with people. And I've been lucky so far in after doing like 3 to 5 years of this almost full time, never really having too much of any controversy, right? But I just personally like always try and be extra thorough about communication with things and extra cautious about every single thing that I do and every interaction or new connection I make and new networking opportunity, because of the fact that like I'm already playing with fire, right? Like I'm just trying to keep it contained as much as possible, so to say.
I imagine if that's your like full-time thing, like that's probably like that's got to be kind of dangerous, right? Like the people that send you stuff, like sometimes you just don't know, So that's I can imagine.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to lowball somebody. I wouldn't want to, accidentally take on a fake item in inventory. And especially when it comes to like in this sense to having like a working relationship with somebody or just being in communication with somebody quite a bit. I always try and be very clear and straightforward and honest and open about everything, right? And that's why I think that we've gotten along and why we've networked with a bunch of other people and kind of you almost been brought into the circle of people now where you've done videos with me and you've done videos with John and John's done stuff with Andrew, and it kind of all you just keep
Circle.
everyone's just nice and cordial and open with each other, then it creates a kind of a community basically for this stuff,
Yeah,
which is
everyone's been
important.
chill too.
Yeah, well, Andrew here, and then my buddy Jonathan Doe, who directs some of the most like gnarly movies I've ever seen, um and then Andrew collecting some of the most gnarly things I've ever seen, are both like absolute chillers. I would say, I guess you could describe them as, which is it's always nice to work with relaxed people like that.
Refreshing, man.
Mhm.
So on the topic of when it comes to idolizing and glamorizing, serial killers such as Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Richard Ramirez, and we could even throw James Holmes in there because there's a lot of mass shooters and school shooters that are glamorized and looked up to. Does that bother you from the perspective that you hold?
Honestly, I think like it always bothered me. Like when I was a kid, like like the only criminal charge I've ever had on my record was like aggravated menacing because I think there was a girl bullying a disabled kid, okay? Like, and kids like to talk smack, right? So
Mhm.
of course I made the mistake of saying it on the internet. And something about stabbing her to death with a spork, and apparently sporks are really scary, so then cops showed up at my door. But my point is like, because we were like the goth kids, right? Like we listen to like metal, and we were like,
Mhm.
obviously I'm not normal, dude. So we were a little different, and they I remember like them saying at the police station, like, oh well, ever since Columbine, we can never be too careful. And I was like, you guys
Mhm.
suck. And I was when I was younger too, like I was really young. Like I should not have been reading any of the stuff I read when I was little, but I remember reading an article about Columbine in a magazine, and this girl was talking about like dealing with like the post-traumatic stress and how like her friend was killed and she's like washing her hair in the shower. I probably tell people about this a lot because it's just ironic that like, she's like, I would look over and I could see her, like she was hallucinating and having flashbacks. And I was like, oh my God, I can't imagine that ever happening to me,
Mhm.
and then it happened to me. So in the beginning, like I thought it was weird that like other chicks were like idolizing or like the way that I was looking at, old obviously older photos of the guys in Motley Crue and stuff, right? Like that was not a job. They look great now. But like that was the way that they were looking at like, Dylan and Eric and stuff like that. And I was like,
Mhm.
what the like what why? You know what I mean? Like, cause I was like that, like your biggest accomplishment was like you just lit up a whole school, you know what I mean? Like what?
Mhm.
Um, and like I understood the appeal, like of, I guess yeah, I get the appeal. My mom and I used to joke like, oh yeah, man, Dahmer was a looker, but like
Mhm.
beyond that, nothing, right? So like I don't. I never understood the appeal. And you know, especially like with me, like prisoners that I write to, like I love supporting like political prisoners and stuff, right? So like, but I have rules, right? Like there's certain things that I won't write to or send them commissary or support or whatever.
Mhm.
You know, because those just aren't people I would make friends with in real life, right? But like, you know, I understand the collecting. I understand being interested. I think people and like I'm not going to say I wasn't ever drawn to people who weren't good people. Like I've survived domestic abuse before, right? So like I don't know if I fully understand the draw to like, you know, bad guys, but like bad guys who have actually like, you know, raped children and like killed children and you know what I mean? Like just like shot up an entire family and burned their house down or something, right? Like I never, even when I was younger, I didn't understand it. And then after surviving a mass shooting, like even when I was younger, I was like, ew, like that's your dream guy? Like, come on, dude. Like there's like rock stars out there and stuff.
Mhm.
What's wrong with you? And then like I guess when I got older too, it was just like when I saw people that were like, you know, literally like coming to my social media pages and like telling me that I was like disgusting and they would find my modeling photos and call me like fat and ugly and like dog ugly was the one that was funny because I love dogs. But you know, it was like these people, I don't think any of the homies actually believed that like it was a conspiracy, right? Like I don't think they believe that. I think like 99 to 100% of them just want to screw the guy. So like, you know,
Yeah.
I think it made me feel more what's the right word? Like it made me feel a little more grossed out by people that I think like glamorize or like crush on these guys because I'm just like, this is the weirdest thing to be a groupie for.
Mhm.
Like being a groupie for a child molester is strange because like there's rock stars and stuff out there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just, you know, I think after the shooting happened, it made me a little even more like, what the heck, you know?
Mhm. This is a little off topic, but totally gonna forget if I don't mention it now. But you mentioned Columbine, and obviously things changed a lot when that happened out there in your area. Like I'm sure that a lot of things changed, and I'm sure that that was a wild thing to live through. That happening close, and then being involved in a shooting later. But you had an uncle who was a first responder for Columbine. Was that correct?
Yeah, like we grew up in Ohio and he actually moved out to Littleton, Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
around the time that I think he and my dad graduated from school.
Mm. Yeah. So and it's wild to think that you had connections to like two such high profile cases, both mass shootings. One of them a little more indirectly, and one of them like firsthand. You know.
Yeah, and I mean that was weird because like I remember reading about Columbine, but like no one really told me like, oh, Uncle D was like at that thing. You know what I mean? Like no
Mm-hmm.
one, I didn't really know because I was pretty young. What? How old was I? I don't know, but I was pretty young, you know, when Columbine happened. So I mean, it was actually really cathartic like after the shooting happened to know like I had a family member who like sort of had a grasp on like what I was going through and like
Mm-hmm.
it was really comforting. Like, you know, my mom flew out there to visit and we went to their place for dinner. And I mean, he looked at my wounds and he was like, if you'd been a couple inches closer, you would have been dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have this really nice property in the mountains. We went out to go do some exposure therapy. It was fun. But, you know, by the way, don't hike up and down a mountain with bullets in your legs. It's hard. But yeah, so you know, we had that connection and it was just yeah it's really strange like I've survived way too many like weird events like I'm not surprised that people think I might be like a CIA agent or something
Mm-hmm.
that's really good at covering it up because I should not be living in a whatever I should be making a lot more money if you know I should get an Academy Award for the acting apparently.
Yeah, for sure.
The doctors would tell you yes.
So what types of things do you do to, you know, relieve that pain and trauma? Like what types of therapy do you do? I know you said exposure therapy, but do you still do anything to this day?
Yeah, actually, so like when I was still in the Navy, like before Colorado, like I, you know, got sent to a psychiatric hospital for 5 days. Whoo, now I'm gone. But yeah, so I think that was when I finally had to like start addressing like trauma that I dealt with since I was like age 4, you know what I mean? And like it's like when people look at like the shooting, right? Like they kind of just assume that like maybe it's just easier for them to do this, but like they just assume that like that's the only thing that I am working through right now, you know, like so I had just layers of crap, you know, before this even happened. So it was like compounded trauma that I was trying to like stuff into a filing cabinet and like close the door shut before, you know, with the Tupperware lids that come spilling out of the cupboard. But yeah, so it was like I was already starting to work on that stuff. And I actually had made an appointment for a therapist that, I mean, the way everything lines up for me is real strange, man. But it was like a few days or something, like less than a couple weeks after the shooting actually happened, was my appointment, my intake with my new therapist. And so it was cool. Like at first we did like, you know, talk therapy. She had me like write out what happened. She was like, we want to start from the beginning of your life, but we need to like decompress from this like right now because you just went through it. And like talk therapy was only so effective, right? So like I like a couple years ago I did a dialectical behavior therapy group, and like DBT is just like I can't preach about it enough if you have like trauma or personality disorders or something. And um yeah, like I go through therapy. I have a psychiatrist. Like 5 years ago I started doing like 12-step program, and haven't not drinking helps a lot. You know, but you know, things that are therapeutic for me, like I don't know, just kind of like starting from the beginning and nurturing that inner child, you know, like I have 2 nieces now, and like I want them to have like a strong like female role model in their lives. And like I don't know if I want to be a role model, but like a good example. I want to be a good example. And in like loving them enough to do that, I've really started like, you know, healing my inner child, which I think, you know, the inner child, like that's the root, like, and so now I'm getting to a point where actually, you know, I love me, like, and I think like just finally caring enough about myself to really actually take care of myself. Don't judge me for the coffee. I think I'm doing, you know, okay. But yeah, so like actual like therapy and psychiatry and doing the 12 steps and like social, right? Like humans are social species.
Mm-hmm.
So I really strongly feel that like reaching out the best that you can is really important because I couldn't be here without community, and the work I do involves working with animals. So I'm passionate about it. So I don't know, finding something that I'm passionate about and running with it, you know, haunting, acting, making creepy stuff and being with the dogs and my loved ones, you know, that's been super healing for me. And talking about it, obviously, like I think sometimes it's hard to talk about it like in detail, obviously, but like telling my story without people screaming at me that it didn't happen or something is kind of refreshing.
Another aspect to that too, not to tell you what is therapeutic for you by any means, but something that it seems like you've sort of mentioned before, um, is that in selling that stuff, selling the buckshot, and then like you said, we have some medical reports for your injuries that I've had on my site, and when I get it, I'll bump those up when we put this out, so it kind of, if anyone wants to go to callcollectibles.org, it'll be at the top there to go with this. With those, and then you have some signed prints as well on the site, and then I got my like little stack of I've told you I've been thrifting copies of the Dark Knight Rises because there's been some people who've asked you to sign copies of that, so I've been looking out for those when I come across them. But all of that you've kind of mentioned, I think, before to me, that has helped kind of take some power back in the situation, that you're like, you know, fuck it, this is my stuff and I'm going to make something positive out of this at least, right?
Yeah, I think it helps a lot because it's like the stuff was kind of just like sitting around looking at me. So it was like it's just sitting around staring me in the face. And I'm like, why, you know, after all of the like, you know, I remember someone saying like, oh, you're not free from criticism. Like, no, you, like I am like I am not free from constructive criticism, but like I am absolutely 100% not deserving of people like coming at me and being hateful because they're like delusional and think something didn't happen. But like even if the government did set it up, like why come after potential victims? You know what I mean? Anyways, but like it did kind of help me take the power back to be able to like I think like not so much before with the first items, but now like present day, now that I'm in a place where like I don't care if people like me or not. I hope they do. I want them to have a positive experience with me. Like, I don't want people to be unhappy, right? But like, I don't care. And so like,
Yeah.
I'm really happy that I get to, it does help me take the power back at least a little, because, you know, I can actually take this thing that was so negative and like make some sort of profit off of it, and you know, pay my bills. Like, being a differently abled woman in her first year of running a business, it's rough. So like, yeah, it's really, I think it is really healing to be able to just to not feel any shame, because like, I don't feel like people can shame you unless you're able to feel ashamed, and like, I'm not, you know what I mean? They can only shame you if you are able to feel shamed by them. And you know, when I get criticism from people, I consider the source now. And
Yeah.
if the source is just some jerk on the internet who's obviously got nothing going on in their lives except, you know, they want to screw this guy that shot up a theater full of like men, women, and children, eh. Just eh.
So, when a mass shooting happens, you know, it's so common in America now. Do you ever like think back to what happened, or do you just move on with your life like it's just another daily event that happens or goes on?
Um, I feel like it depends. Like, there's always one, you know, once in a while that like kind of, I think especially if I'm just like in an emotionally vulnerable position, you know, like, and then I hear about it and I'm like, oh, and like I gotta go cry a little and just like kind of sit with the feelings, you know, like riding that wave is like the most important thing I learned in therapy, right? Like, because if you like resist that feeling, it won't go away. But like, yeah, I think like every summer, dude, like the anniversary's there, and I try to tell myself it's just another day, but like also it's mass shooting season. That's what I call summer. I call it cat collar season. I call it mass shooting season and shorts season. So like, I don't even like summer anymore. I used to love it, but yeah, thanks. These people ruined it for me. But yeah, it's like it's almost a constant thing. So like sometimes I see it and my brain just like kind of shuts off, and I'm just like, wow, that really sucks. Like, I know that's terrible, but like I can't really, if I think too deeply about it, it's gonna hurt me and not gonna help anyone else. Sometimes I try to do things to help. Like, I'd heard about the shooting in Dayton, and I tried to get like people together to make, because like a bunch of people sent me, you know, cards after the theater shooting, and I thought it'd be really sweet to make like some cards and send them out to the victims advocate and try to like get them out to people. I didn't tell a lot of people about it because I don't see the point telling people about good things you do for other people, because of why are you doing them. But yeah, like I don't know. I think it just depends on the shooting or like the time that it happens. You know, sometimes I'm like, oh man, that one hit me pretty hard. But it's just so, I mean, that's messed up, right? But like, it's so common that it's almost like, I don't know. It's almost like, you know, hearing that someone went to the grocery store. It's so common now. It's that yeah, sometimes I almost feel desensitized to it, which sucks, you know.
Um, yeah, and just kind of a side note here too is that you and I have talked a couple of times and done interviews, and then Jonathan Doe as well. I think on his channel Murderabilia Show and Tell. And if anyone's interested in looking that stuff up, I feel like every time that you've talked or I've watched you talk with somebody else, some of the same things come up, but you've got very not different answers. Obviously, you have the same consistent answers, but you're able to tell a different story with it each time and have a different kind of interpretation or understanding or way of communicating that to people. So if anyone's interested in looking at those too, I highly recommend it, because you're somebody who definitely puts a lot of thought into this, and you're not just repeating the same thing over and over again. You're actively constantly thinking about all these things that are happening, whether it's current shootings or the one you were involved with or previous ones. And yeah, I find it really interesting to kind of see how not that you change your feelings on it, but that the interpretation and what you're doing to kind of process things and things that you're doing in your life that are different than they would have been if you weren't affected by that have kind of been evolving since we've met.
Yeah, and I think it's important to like evolve through, you know, stuff like that, because it's like you said, like it's not like, oh, she's got a different story, but it's like I do think that like depending on my mood that day or like how much I've like learned or
Mhm.
thought about it or processed it, like, you know, I think a lot of people like see stuff in like black and white, right? So it's like if I had a thing against people that collected murderabilia, right, from like a moral standpoint, I'd be like, oh, F those people, and like I would just feel that way forever, right? But like,
Mhm.
you know, there are people that I used to love, and there are people I used to just absolutely despise, and like they've switched around a little because you know, I mean that's just like an example of how you know our feelings change and stuff. And you know, I feel like if I was just like regurgitating the same story every time, which I kind of felt like I was doing with the news at first, I was just like, yeah, I know it's my name and whatever, death by firing squad, I don't care. Like, 'cause I was just so sick of them like calling me up, you know. But you know, it's not like I was being inauthentic back then. I was just exhausted.
Mhm.
But like, you know, when it first happened. But I mean, I'm tired now, but I think that it's important to like actually like analyze these things because otherwise like how do you work through trauma if you don't what's the right word, acknowledge it. And I think that to regurgitate the same answer over and over again, it doesn't feel authentic. Like
Mhm.
I'm known by people for being a little rambly and like just candid, you know. So like I feel like, you know, especially being tired all the time because the new work schedule is kind of weird, but yeah, I'm always candid about it. So it, you know,
Mhm.
it probably is interesting to look back at these interviews. And even when I looked at the interviews from when it first happened, you know, like I always tell people, like, I want to be the person that I needed when I was a little girl. But like when
Mhm.
I was watching the interview with Jonathan Doe versus like some crap that was on TMZ Entertainment 10 plus years ago, you know, like screw those guys. It it was different. And I feel like I'm finally the woman that like I needed when the shooting first happened. You
Mhm.
know, so I guess like just, you know, it's all about growth and just being candid and you know,
Yeah,
just
for sure.
always be authentic, you know.
Mhm.
So being that there's so many mass shootings in America, let's say there's a survivor that's listening right now, or even a survivor of like domestic violence or attempted murder or something like that. What type of advice would you give them to cope with everyday, you know, trauma and healing moving forward?
Whoa, that's a big one. Like, you know, when I was really little, like, you know, I suffered like childhood sexual trauma, like had a lot of abusive relationships, and then like some incidents in the military that were not desirable, and then, you know, the theater shooting, and then a domestic violence thing, and oh my God, it just like the list just goes on and on. Like I need life to just calm down a little. And it has a little, right? But
Mhm.
um I tell people like I know when you're working on this stuff, right, and working on you and healing yourself, like it doesn't seem like it's getting better. And it's kind of like my therapist, she gave me this graph, right? Like the chart goes up this way, right? And then there's ups and downs around the line. Like you will have peaks and valleys, right? But
Mhm.
like it's still at least gradually getting better if you keep working on it. And I know there's different types of trauma, so there's probably not like a blanket statement for every single one, but like as someone who's experienced almost every single one, I have a, you know, like I went to the doctor recently and they were looking at my, you know, psychological history, and they're like, oh my God, you know, like that they were just like, you've really seen some things, huh? I'm like, yeah, I know. But
Mhm.
you know, in my opinion, I think that like for healing, like you have to have a toolbox, like, and sometimes that toolbox has to be a warehouse. And that for me, like there's so many different tools for healing. Like, you know, I tell people like you don't just go to one intake appointment with a therapist and like, oh, bam, healed. You know, people are like, therapy didn't work for me. I'm like, how many did you see? Right? Because you're not going to be compatible with every single one, right? And so,
Mhm.
you know, for me, it's I see a therapist, I see a psychiatrist, I think living every day like you're going to die the next day, I don't know how I feel about that because like I pretty much live every day like I could die the next day, right? Like I'm not one of those people who like expects the worst, right? Like I prepare for the worst. I don't expect the worst. I think that when you're constantly expecting the worst, like the worst is gonna happen then. Like so yeah, I guess like to sum it up, like my advice for people that are going through something like that is, you know, like make sure you have a whole toolkit because there's not like a home isn't built out of one material. And I feel like, you know, you're only as strong as your foundation. So uh, I think the thing, aside from like therapy, psychiatry, the 12 steps, blah, 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 that helped me heal the most was just like spending time doing stuff I love. Like, when I first got sober, I started working at a haunted house, and like it sounds so trivial to people, but like I'm so passionate about it because I finally found something I was good at besides drinking. And so find those things that you love, and like just go do them. I know people are like, so how do I get started? I'm like, I don't know how I got started. I just went and did it. So find the people you love and the things you love, and if you don't have people and things you love, start doing the things you just don't hate and see which one of them you might end up loving. Get your toolkit and find the people you love and do the things you love. That's where I was going with that. My advice for people healing from trauma. I had no idea what happened. It was, you were like, did she freeze? I'm like, I don't know what happened. So yeah, I'm back.
Yeah, you were really ramping up, and then it was like, oh, what's coming next? So she's gonna say
Yeah, I was
something
like,
really
do
deep, and
the
then it
things you
paused.
love. And
Yeah.
but I mean, that was my point though, is just like, humans are a social species. Find the people that love you and nurture you, and uh yeah, that's it. That's all I've got. It's just community, therapy, and things you love. I mean, there were some days where I didn't love anything but my dog. So, even if you feel like you can't love anything, I don't know. If you have the means to get a dog,
Get a dog or a cat. I think it's
yeah,
good advice regardless.
or a cat dog like Greta.
Yeah.
I have a Jack Russell, a Jack Russell mix, so she's
Oh,
cat type
cute.
dog.
A
Yeah,
little
I'm blessed.
wishbone.
I wish she was here. She's at my mom's place. Otherwise, she'd be like barking at everything. So she'll be with my mom.
Oh, do you have anything else, Taylor, before we get out of here?
Not really. I mean, I'm about to this is completely unrelated to anything the animals. I'm about to go pet sit for 10 days in the woods for 4 dogs and 2 cats. So I'm looking forward to that. This was like this is like my last socialization I'm doing before I'm going off the grid, and it's you two are very easy people to talk to. So I'm glad we could all kind of chat, and I guess for my selfish reasons, I guess I got some nice socialization in before I disappear for a bit. So appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. I was kind of nervous, honestly, because this is the second time I've ever spoke to a survivor of a mass shooting of any sort, so I didn't really know what to expect either.
I didn't totally know what to expect, but actually, I mean, I probably rambled a lot today too. So like, sorry in advance. I'm just like pretty much running on caffeine and spite and dog care. Like but yeah, like I listened to the podcast before, and actually I appreciated the whole one about self-care and stuff, because like, dude, like I'm a first year business owner, and like I am pretty much a single person operation. So yeah, it's I needed that.
It seems like more and more over the past few years, my social circle is people who are doing self-employed stuff, and generally it leans into weird stuff, weird oddities or horror, the true crime stuff, or people who are like adjacently like building their lives around having that be an important part of it, and then also doing their business to be able to support their weird habits with that stuff. So yeah, it's interesting how many like the networking, like I was saying earlier, like I you got in touch with me, and then I put you in touch with John, who you knew kind of through somebody else, and then Andrew knows him, and then Andrew knows you now, and it's interesting how this kind of, when it comes to the true crime thing, it's not just a bunch of like spooky weirdos worshiping serial killers. It's a lot of like and everyone's doing different things too. I mean, you obviously have some kind of connection with the true crime world and stuff, and then Andrew's doing the podcast and interviews and meeting all these crazy contacts and putting work into that, and I'm just selling spooky shit out of my apartment. But yeah, it's a interesting community of weirdos that are all involved in this. It seems very friendly, nice weirdos. There's no dangerous, sketchy people that I've come across. Everyone's very sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell if someone is sketchy right away now. So I'm just like, oh, block. I'm like, no. But yeah, I mean, it's, I think we're not the type of people based on our hobbies and interests, like that can work normal jobs without it getting
Oh
really
yeah.
redundant, you know? So like you've got to at least have some kind of like thing on the side or something. I don't
Mhm,
know. Like I worked at a factory once and I just wanted to like I was done.
mhm.
Which is fine for other people. There's nothing wrong with being a person that can do that, right?
No,
But
for
like it's
sure.
not
Just
my personality. I'm just a little different, you know.
it doesn't work for everybody, that's for sure.
Awesome. Well, I think we can get out of here, and thank you again for giving us your time and your perspective, and we greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks you guys. I go let a dog out to poop.